Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math. Well, oh noes! Another movie came in under expectations. Maybe the expectations are just too damn high. I mean, we all knew that Ryan Gosling is not a box office draw and that general audiences aren't interested in stories about Hollywood. So, shocker, it did not make that insane prediction. And did anyone here really think it was going to hit 40 million? When I heard that, I was like, wow, I see absolutely no evidence of that. They're saying that it was the pre-sales that made Hollywood feel that way, but I guess there just wasn't a lot of walk-up business. But still, I just would never have expected that. Now everyone is sad that If opened in the mid-30s, which is not that far from 40. And it has a shockingly good cinema score considering the reviews. So if the industry had just projected 25 to 30, we'd be rejoicing. The only reason people are upset is because of a made-up predicted number. Well, it's not. Clearly the formula for predictions is wrong. There were a bunch of Hollywood executives at Cannes, over the weekend, and Donna Langley from Universal, who, rarely is in the spotlight, but she did a little interview. And she said, something about women in the industry, I believe. And she talked about the fact that the industry has lost about 20% of its audience. Oh, not great. She tried to put a positive spin on it, but I don't see these projections being whittled down 20%. Do you? So let's take a look at some of the other box office tracking that's for upcoming films. Furiosa and Garfield, these actually seem pretty good to me. That's a tight race. It could be a tight race. But I think both movies have it in them. Furiosa has very good reviews. We'll see how Garfield's come in. But I think they could both open with about 50 million because it's a holiday weekend. I'd love to see that. The industry would love to see that. And I think there's a chance. But Bad Boys at 55 to 75, by the way, talk about hedging your bets. What kind of tracking is that? It could open, there's a 20 million range there? I guess it's because it stars, of course, the still untested Will Smith post-slap. So Hollywood's not sure the way things are going to go. But even 55, I think, is ridiculously high, considering how little interest there's been in the trailers online. Sometimes audiences show up anyway. Sometimes they do. And I heard there might be some pretty spiffy trailers in front of the movie, but you can watch those trailers online. I would say, just to be reasonable and to not kneecap the movie before it comes out, I would put it at about 40 million opening. And hopefully we're all really happily surprised. As for Inside Out 2, they're also thinking anywhere from 80 to 115. Do the people doing these projections have any idea what's been going on with Disney and the culture wars lately? And also what's been done to Pixar with the Disney Plus releases? Sure, the first Inside Out opened with 90 million. And to be fair, that was a return to form for the studio after a bit of a rough patch even back then. Back when opening at around 60 was tough for the studio. But these days, I would put it at around 60. That would put it where Kung Fu Panda 4 opened, a skadoosh under 60. That Kung Fu Panda 4 was considered a big hit. And I think, considering where, again, the industry, Disney and Pixar are right now, I think 60 is a healthy, reasonable prediction. And again, I think we should move towards being really happily surprised instead of disappointed every single weekend. All right, but I'm curious, do you plan to see any of these movies in theaters? But I think that leads to the real problem with the theatrical business these days, and that's the theaters themselves. It's not so much the movies. I think you guys want to see a lot of these movies, but you're not having a good time seeing them in theaters. First off, the prices to go to the movies are definitely too damn high. There's not only the tickets, but the concession stand prices, and then some of you have even pointed out the gas to get there. Then when you're paying so much money, obviously you expect a great experience, when it's so expensive in particular. If you were paying I think considering you could watch these movies at home and have a great experience, guaranteed, yeah, you expect to have a better experience in the theaters. I think that's the reason that premium screens are becoming so popular, even at the higher price point, because I think people feel if they're going to go out, they're going to go out. Also, although with If, by the way, just 22% of its opening was premium screens, but I think that's because it's a family film. And so there's going to be a lot of talking and stuff going on in the theater anyway. And I think, families, unfortunately, it's not in their budget for such a large group to go to a premium screen. But overall, audiences have been picking premium screens over regular screens. And I think that's because there's the hope that with such a high price point, hopefully your fellow moviegoers not only have also paid a lot, but, if they value the premium experience, they probably value the movie-going experience. And they might be a little better behaved. But even then, there's no guarantee. Let me tell you a little story about my time seeing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes again this weekend at the iPic here in New York City, which by no means is a cheap experience. Disaster! Total disaster! If they ask me for my feedback, and this is my second bad review, after I saw Gentlemanly Warfare there too, Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. You remember my story about that. Here, people were on their phones using the light. So they were either on their phones or using the light to see their menu or their food, which, in that case, I know what it's like being at a movie that has dining. I know that happens a little bit. But that was talking overall. People were acting like they were at home on their sofa. And I'm like, you're not at home. You're sitting next to me, and I don't want to hear it. A family showed up with a small child. And while I was impressed that this child was around 5, this child was into the movie. So I appreciated and respected their attention span. But they talked a lot and loudly. And I was like, isn't there supposed to be a rule that you can't bring little kids into the movie after 6? So I think this movie theater should have that rule. And then a group came in late. They used their cell phone light to find their seats. It's a sold out show. I'm like, it's the only seats that are left, okay? And they held their phone up like a torch, like the Statue of freaking Liberty, and lit up the entire theater, like 20 to 30 minutes in the movie. I'm like, why do you even want to watch this movie when you're so late? And then because it was a sold out show, so they had purchased seats that didn't have waiter service, they had to get up to go get their food and then go again when it was ready because, it's like full dining there. And I understand that they have to do that, but it was just so incredibly disruptive. The whole time I was like, I can't believe how much money I paid for this subpar experience. Watching movies at home on digital or streaming isn't just cheaper, but you get to totally control the experience. No interruptions, or ones you're used to. Whatever food you want. A lot of us go to the movies a lot. Who isn't getting sick of movie theater food? And I think that every time a lot of moviegoers, I've seen you guys talk about it in the comments. You're like, you know what? I'm going to try theaters again. I'm going for it. And then you're like, I remember why I stopped going. And then you stop going for a few weeks or maybe months until you're like, you know what? I miss it. I'm going to try it again. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I remember again why I stopped going. Is this the cycle, the vicious cycle that you find yourself in? For that reason, the only movie I've seen audiences get really excited about this year as a theatrical must-see experience was Dune Part 2. I think people were very reverential of that movie, so maybe they were also a little better behaved. Do you have any Dune 2 nightmare stories? And the only other movie on the horizon I see like that is Deadpool and Wolverine in late July. That's really far away. Maybe Twisters. We'll talk about Twisters. I got a little evidence that Twisters might be percolating. And I saw a fun tweet about how it was a fun summer blockbuster for popcorn and an icy. And I thought that was really cute. But again, is someone going to ruin the experience for me? That hinges on me having a good time while I watch it. I'm spoiled a little bit by critic screenings because, of course, we're all there professionally. And so we're all very well behaved. Everything else outside of those movies, again, I think you're probably interested in these movies, but you'll watch them when you watch them. When the price point looks good to you, when it's convenient. And that's the real problem that Hollywood has right now. I'm surprised that it's so hard for them to figure this out. The only thing it must be is that they themselves do not go to the movies, which I've said has long been a problem with Hollywood, that they don't sample their own product. Also Los Angeles, a little bit of a better viewing experience there because everybody's in the industry, or for the most part. And so they're very interested in the film. But have they gone to the theaters in the rest of the country? Or how about the people who own the theaters themselves? I think they'd figure it out pretty quick. So take Inside Out 2, right? That we were just talking about with the projections. Do you need to see that in theaters? Especially when it's coming eventually to Disney Plus at no extra cost. That happened to Wish. Wish blew up down the line on Disney Plus. Elemental did well in theaters. Great film. I loved it. I'm so glad people saw it in theaters, but it also ended up doing quite well on Disney Plus. But, it split its audience. It only got to about 500 million at the box office, far from the original Inside Out's gross. But it did very well. But, what's the value of doing well on a streaming service with subscriptions? Now Disney Plus is starting to sell ads on those movies. But did they break up a movie? I mean, do you have Disney Plus with ads? How do they handle movies? Are there ads in the middle of the movie? We'll see what happens, but it's a mess. All right, back to If. That cinema score, though. Wow, John Krasinski and Ryan Reynolds can feel great about that. They can just put that on their forehead when they're talking to anybody about the movie. They can be like, did you see the solid A that this movie got? And even if the box office, that's hard to do. Even if the box office never truly materializes, like theatrically, Garfield is likely going to steamroll that movie next weekend. It's got Chris Pratt, who, audiences love that guy, and you gotta admire his consistency at the box office. And aren't you starting to get a little jazz for it? I'm planning to get pizza when I see it. How about you? The press screening was today, so I chose Movie Math instead. So I will see it on Thursday and review it Thursday evening. But I'm very excited. I'm actually really starting to look forward to it. So I think that's going to do very well. But I think for If, that means it's likely to do very well with the cinema score down the line on digital and then eventually on Paramount Plus. And for a movie with almost no diversity in the cast, the diversity scores themselves were still pretty good, which means that Krasinski and Reynolds themselves have created a really good relationship with a diverse audience. Speaking of Krasinski, I truly think that thanks to the strength of A Quiet Place and his short-lived Some Good News during the pandemic, didn't he sell that? Whatever happened to that? I was like, someone paid a lot of money for that brand and then did absolutely nothing with it. Krasinski has established himself as a strong filmmaker, and there is an interest in what he's up to. He's like a mini wholesome Christopher Nolan. Also, I think once again, audiences show that they're interested in new concepts, not sequels, or even worse, the fourth, fifth, or sixth installments of a franchise. But unlike last summer's franchise graveyard, Kung Fu Panda 4, one of the biggest movies of the year, and the latest Apes is doing pretty good. Good for this movie. I like this movie, even though it has very bad, not bad, but really weak audience scores. But it fell under 60% in its second weekend. A little bit of a better hold than the last installment, but still, they're basically performing the same. War only got to about 500 million. No Dawn, it was at 700 million. What was the difference? I'm sure Hollywood's trying, what is it? Tell me. However, this does give Disney, via Fox, its first movie of the year to pass the century mark. They've only released Fox movies so far, though, thanks to the strikes. And Inside Out 2 will be their first official Disney-branded movie of the year. The Disney slate is very lean this year because of the strikes. And I do think Apes will continue to do very well on digital and then ultimately streaming, Disney Plus Hulu. People, I hope, are going to watch the heck out of it. It's clearly a good brand. People like that, got good name recognition. People are like, oh, what are the Apes up to? And I really liked it, and I know a lot of you did too. We're like, what's with these weak audience scores? But we have to acknowledge them, so I guess we'll say it's a solid movie. As for the rest of the top 10, new horror prequel The Strangers, well, it actually opened bigger than Abigail, which really sucks for Abigail. But I guess technically The Strangers is an established franchise. People have been like, well, how did it all begin? Well, now you know. Clearly, though, overall, there is a diehard horror audience that will show up for almost anything. Tarot, I saw your comments about my pronunciation. Tarot is still in the top 10. And that movie sucks. All right, the Amy Winehouse bio, which fans have been against since day one, sure enough, couldn't find an audience. People said they weren't going to see it, and they meant it. And Prime Video's Blue Angels documentary, playing on about 200 IMAX screens, did nicely with a healthy per-theater average, the third in the top 10. It's not like an amazing awards movie per-theater average, but it's good. They can feel good about that. As for holdovers, The Fall Guy, it ain't reaching that century mark, and Universal should get it on digital pretty soon. People are still, it still seems fresh. Challengers just hit digital with very little fanfare, but I think that's why Amazon MGM did it. They wanted the movie out there while it still seems fresh. Over on streaming, starting with Nielsen, Fallout might not have gotten anywhere near Stranger Things 4's record of 7.2 billion minutes for its first full week. That's the record. It's far from the record, but it's been a while since something did this well. In fact, Fallout is the hottest thing on streaming since Suits. And hey, guess what? This was actually made this year. It's a decisive win for new original content. But people, they still love that acquired content. Family Guy continues to be a huge hit on Disney Plus Hulu. It's really winding down on Fox proper, though. They're like, let's move it to Wednesdays. Now it's going to be a mid-season replacement. How is Patrick Warburton supposed to support his parents? I don't know what he's getting paid off this Disney Plus Hulu deal. While apparently audiences over 65 have discovered Killing Eve on Netflix. And here comes Jodie Comer with a ton of new upcoming roles in big movies. Has she expanded her fan base in a very unique way at just the right time? Hey, over 65 crowd, are you excited about 28 years later? What else has she signed on for? She had something else, too, that was pretty big. Hilarious. But maybe they will be. Who would have thought they would like Killing Eve so much? That's a pretty edgy show. Baby Reindeer looks a little soft here in its debut, but remember, it blew up in its second week on streaming thanks to word of mouth. So we'll see how it fares on Netflix on next week's Nielsen's charts. With original content, with its second to last episode, Shogun has climbed to number 4 on the OG chart, but it's still a long way from being able to get on that overall chart. Will it ever get on the overall chart? Maybe, but if it is, it'll be like 9 or 10. I hope so. That would be great. It doesn't matter, though. Disney Plus and Hulu are in love, and they just renewed it for 2 more seasons. And we were talking about this on Friday. It moved from the limited category, limited series, to drama, full-on drama in the Emmys. The drama category is super weak. It could dominate there. And so, Shogun, don't cry for Shogun. Three Body Problem has also been renewed for 1 more season and a much-needed win for Benioff and Weiss. I think it would have been so embarrassing for them if after their last Game of Thrones debacle, then they couldn't even get this show renewed. So, they were probably sweating something fierce. They were like, please renew us. We'll work for free. I'm sure they didn't say that, but they might. I wonder why they renewed it and why it took so long. The Gentleman hasn't been renewed yet, but it's very interesting, speaking of careers, to see how it's blowing up Theo James. He survived all this time, by the way, thanks to a second career in voice work. He's Bastion. Put some respect on his name. He's got Emmy heat for this show. I was looking through all the Emmy predictions, and I was like, Theo James, how the heck did he get in here? Plus, it's again, weird year, not a lot of stuff. So Theo James is also like, yoink, I'll take an Emmy, or at least a nomination. It's going to be nuts if he's sitting there. Plus, he's attached to a new Stephen King movie, which was going around at Cannes. They didn't make it. They're like, who wants to release this? And Neon was like, I do. And they're like, wow, go Theo James, go. He first turned heads in Downton Abbey over a decade ago. My goodness. And thankfully, he never gave up. Is he finally having his Hollywood moment? And is landing a spot on the highly coveted White Lotus what lit the fuse for this explosion? And kudos to the Upshaws, still making waves with its 5th installment. It's technically season 3, but they do them in parts and halves, and they come out very far apart. So it's technically season 5. The movies chart, it's pretty sad over here, with none of these movies able to make the overall chart, including the debut of Rebel Moon Part 2. All that goodwill from the Snyder Cut lost. What a shame. With Netflix's charts, Brooke Shields, Miranda Cosgrove, and Benjamin Bratt, and Chad Michael Murray, I'm sure some of you were like, don't forget him. He was getting a little heat for this on social media over the weekend. This was the week before, but more than tripled the debut of Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted. What? That's embarrassing. Unfrosted went up by about 1 million views with its first full week on Netflix's charts. Can Shields maybe reinvigorate her career with feel-good family fluff on streaming, a la Jennifer Garner? They do have a similar vibe. With shows, you'd think Tom Brady's number here of views would be a little higher considering its social media footprint, which was enormous. But maybe that's how a lot of people watched it, clips on social media. However, it generated so much advertising for Netflix with those clips and coverage that the $30 million on Tom Brady was probably still well spent. Here's an interesting question. There was also an unfortunate headline about Tom Brady being sad that his children's feelings were hurt by all the jokes about their mom, Tom Brady's ex-wife. But, that was, as I said, unfortunate. And it seems that Brady, because it's a roast, but should family be off limits? It usually isn't, and they didn't make fun of the kids themselves. But it seems Brady is having a hard time creating a post-football career for himself. And he's trying to make the transition. He's trying to pivot. And he's not like the Kelsey brothers who simply cannot be embarrassed and are making a ton of money for it. Can Brady hold on to his pristine image in today's celebrity culture? And is it still pristine after his very public divorce, Deflategate, an awful last season. I saw him play with one of his last games. I flew to Pittsburgh to see him play. He couldn't have been, it was still a good time, and it was still cool to see Tom Brady before he retired for the second time. But boy, he could not have cared less about being there. And then also that footage of him when he was drunk on that boat, right? Hey, maybe he should go drinking with the Kelseys. There's a show. There's another show we'd all watch live. Tom Brady's like, I've got to make money. So what is Tom Brady's brand today? And is, who he used to be still relevant, if still applicable? Should he just park himself behind a sports commentator desk, which is usually the move for retired athletes? And if he's going to do that, he better do it fast before Jason Kelce changes that game too, the rules of that game. I wonder what kind of commentator Jason Kelce will be. I never thought of it until right now, but if he kind of does it a little bit more interesting, a little bit like his podcast with his brother, he could be worth every penny to ESPN. All right, get on it, Tom Brady. All right, you got to start thinking outside the box. Start thinking like a Kelce. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the Kelceys. I think I hope that I hope that Travis Kelce's intentions with Taylor are true, but you got to hand it to them. They are really handling their careers incredibly well. And everybody, especially in the sports world, should be taking notes. That's how you do it. They are charting new paths that have never been done before. But speaking of live events on Netflix, Cat Williams is doing solid numbers with his second week, still doing solid numbers. But John Mulaney's live talk show, which aired the whole week here, couldn't make the top 10. And again, the numbers at the bottom are pretty low. But it does have some Emmy heat itself, so at least Mulaney is beloved by the industry, if not audiences. I love John Mulaney, although even I did not watch that talk show. When I saw the first episode was hilarious, but then when I saw it was just a traditional talk show, I didn't tune back in. And I love the guy. Love John Mulaney. So maybe it was just the format. Then on iTunes, and because his specials have done well on Netflix in the past. Then on iTunes, sure enough, Godzilla x Kong is doing great, giving Warner Brothers the #1 and #3 movies on digital. And look, as I said, Challengers dropped, but only for rent for $20, which hopefully is why it's not doing better. People are like, I want to own Challengers. I loved that movie. All right, Henry Cavill and Alan Ritchson, yeah, I loved it. But, maybe people feel they don't want to pay a lot if they can. But people usually rent. Have you not? Maybe you didn't know it was out because they didn't really advertise it. Why didn't you get Challengers on digital this weekend? Although I saw some people, there was some shots that were put online and some people were being mean about it. And I was like, that's an incredible sequence. What are you talking about? The one with the POV of the tennis ball. People were laughing at it. And I was like, man, that's art, man. All right, so why is there no respect for Luca Guadagnino and stuff? I mean, that's something that should be thought about. I think he's an extremely talented filmmaker. All right, so Henry Cavill and Alan Ritchson are still doing very well, better than Abigail, which hit digital about the same time. Poor Abigail. That's a good movie, too. Well, Ghostbusters is doing respectable business. Didn't love that. Thought it was weak. Great brand, though. Although Sony is trying its hardest to kill it. And Twister is not only on sale, which is why it's doing so well, but here we go. It seems people are getting ready for Twisters, which is a sequel to this movie. I'm sure you don't have to have seen the first Twister to follow Twisters, but there are some references that we've already seen from the trailers. Maybe this will be a surprise hit at theaters the weekend right before Deadpool and Wolverine drops. What? Why did Universal only give it one weekend? There's no breathing room before Deadpool and Wolverine obliterates the box office. Why not give Twisters some breathing room? That's ridiculous. Maybe if you get sold out of Deadpool and Wolverine, you'll go see Twisters. As for this coming week, as I said, it's Memorial Day weekend here in the United States, and Hollywood is doing some good old-fashioned counter-programming with Furiosa and Garfield. Both orange, though. I think that sounds like an awesome double feature. Again, are you planning to see either of these in theaters? Also, Hitman opens in very limited release before going to Netflix 2 weeks later on June 7th. That's a good window. Usually they only give a week, and you're like, why should I go bother to see it in theaters when I can see it on a week in Netflix? Maybe the 2 week wait will make you go see it in theaters. Also, Glenn Powell's kind of having a moment right now. I don't know if you noticed. We sure talk about it a lot. On digital on Tuesday, there's Boy Kills World. And then on Friday, Friday's becoming a hot digital release day because people feel, hey, it's for the weekend, Civil War. As for streaming movies, Thursday, The Blue Angels debuts on Prime Video after just one weekend on IMAX screens. While on Friday, Netflix releases one of their flashy, star-studded movies, Atlas. I think it looks actually not bad. It looks like a guilty pleasure. Saturday, Lady Gaga has her own cinematic experience hitting Max. I don't know why she would do that. Well, she just opens herself up because she's coming after Taylor Swift and Beyonce. Like, just why have to take the hit if it doesn't potentially do as well? They haven't really been advertising it either. Finally, as for shows, surprisingly slow considering it's a holiday weekend. You would think they'd want something for you to binge. But no, I guess they feel go binge something else that we've already got sitting there. Because, they've said that streaming is a black hole of demand from the consumer because you guys watch this stuff immediately. You just slurp, and drink the milkshake so fast. No cold headaches for you. So they're like, go watch something else. But anyway, is there anything that you haven't watched yet that you might try over the holiday? All right, so Apple TV has a new season of Trying on Wednesday, while on Thursday, the Kardashians are back on Hulu. Prime Video is debuting game show The 1% Club based on the UK hit. And can controversial comedian Shane Gillis spin his stand-up success on Netflix into a successful comedy series? Netflix has been embracing some controversial comedians and getting a lot of views for it. So can they build them into brands, not just the comedy specials? And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And again, how do you think Furiosa and Garfield, let's have our own industry projections, how do you think they're going to do this coming holiday weekend? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.